You know, when you visit a new city, maybe you grab one of those glossy tourist brochures, right?
Right, yeah, the ones they hand out at the station.
Exactly. Or maybe you download a guided audio tour.
Yeah.
And there's a certain polite expectation that comes with that. You expect some dates, bit of architectural trivia, and maybe a brief kind of sterilized version of who lived in the big fancy building.
Oh, absolutely. The very family-friendly version of history.
Yeah. But welcome to our deep dive. Today we are taking you, the listener, on a journey that completely tears up that polite tourist brochure. We've been going through a stack of materials, specifically centering around a bilingual guide script for Osaka Castle in Japan. And, I mean, the history hiding behind those walls is just wild.
It truly is. Our mission today is to look past the beautiful facades, past the tourist photo ops, because what this material actually reveals is a centuries-old masterclass in extreme political power plays, terrifyingly ambitious engineering,
And
and
some culinary history too, right?
right. Yes. Strangely enough, the surprising origins of one of the world's most famous culinary traditions. We are looking at human ambition, paranoia, and ingenuity carved directly into stone.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because looking through these sources, the story of Osaka Castle is framed as this ultimate, centuries-long obsession for three of Japan's most famous historical leaders.
Yeah, the three great unifiers.
Right. But what threw me off immediately is how it starts. The records talk about the first leader, Oda Nobunaga, and he doesn't build the castle.
No, not at all.
Instead, he fights a relentless war for 10 straight years just to win the location. I'm trying to wrap my head around that. A decade of bloodshed, not to capture a fortress, but literally just to own the dirt it would eventually sit on.
It sounds extreme until you look at the geography. If we
Yeah.
connect this to the bigger picture, Nobunaga's 10-year war tells you everything you need to know about the strategic value of that specific spot.
Because of the elevation.
Exactly. In a fractured feudal nation, whoever controlled that elevated plateau, with its access to the river networks and the sea, well, they essentially controlled the economic and military throat of the region. The dirt itself was the ultimate tactical prize.
Wow. Okay, so Nobunaga spends a decade securing the land. Then, the next leader in our timeline, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, comes to power.
Right, he takes over.
And he's the one who actually builds a beautiful, magnificent castle on that exact spot. He essentially plants his flag to project his absolute power over all of Japan. But then the timeline shifts again. The Toyotomi family is defeated by a new faction.
The Tokugawa clan, led by Tokugawa Ieyasu.
Right, and they completely rebuild the castle into the grand structure that stands today. So wait, so the grand castle we're marveling at today in all the modern photos wasn't even the one Hideyoshi built to show off his supreme power. It's the one built by the rivals who defeated his family.
That is the ultimate irony of the site, yeah. Hideyoshi built a masterpiece to secure his legacy, but Ieyasu didn't just want to take Hideyoshi's house. He wanted to essentially erase Hideyoshi's physical legacy from the face of the earth.
Just wipe it out completely.
Right, and replace it with his own on the very same seat of power. The physical building was just a temporary crown sitting on a permanent throne. You bury your enemy, and then you build a heavier, more imposing monument right on top of their foundation so no one ever forgets who won.
That is the ultimate power move. Like, I'm going to put my house right on top of yours.
Exactly.
But if you're the Tokugawa shogunate, and you want to truly cement that kind of dominance over the entire realm, you can't just hire some local contractors to stack bricks. The sources detail how they demanded an impossible display of physical power from their subordinates. It kicked off what looks like a literal heavyweight competition.
A deeply coercive one, yes. The castle is famous for its massive, imposing stone walls, but these stones didn't come from a local quarry down the road. Feudal lords from all over Japan, these powerful men called daimyos, they were ordered to supply and transport these massive boulders to Osaka.
And it wasn't just a quota. Like, the records show they were actively competing against each other.
Oh, fiercely.
They were constantly trying to outdo one another, bringing the biggest, most impressive stones they could possibly find to prove their intense loyalty to the supreme leader. I was reading this and, trying to find a modern equivalent.
What did you come up with?
It's like a high-stakes corporate team-building exercise, but instead of doing trust falls in a hotel conference room, the executives are ordered to drag literal mountains across the ocean to impress the CEO.
That's pretty accurate. And if they failed, the penalty was ruin.
What's fascinating here is the sheer logistical nightmare these lords faced. Many of these massive stones were sourced from places like Shodoshima Island.
Which is an island, so right.
Right. That means they had to be extracted from the earth, loaded, and transported across the open sea. Which sounds hard enough on its own. But the sources detail the actual shipping process, and it honestly sounds mathematically impossible.
It really does.
They would load these gigantic boulders onto large ocean-faring ships. But when they got close to Osaka, the water became too shallow for the heavy galleons. So they had to transfer these incredibly heavy stones from the large ships onto smaller, shallow draft barges just to navigate the final stretch.
That midwater transfer is the tricky part.
I mean, I have to stop you there.
Yeah.
How do you do a midwater transfer of a multi-ton boulder in the 16th century without a hydraulic crane?
This is where we see the true genius of ancient engineering. You can't just pick it up. You have to use the environment.
What do you mean?
Well, while the specific daily mechanics varied, historians understand that manipulating extreme weight on the water in this era relied heavily on the tides and buoyancy. You would lash the shallow barges alongside the deep water ship.
Okay, so they're tied together.
Right. By carefully shifting ballast, moving rocks or water weight, and timing the operation with the rising and falling tides, you could effectively use the ocean itself as a hydraulic lift.
Wow.
As the tide lowers, the large ship settles, transferring the weight of the suspended stone onto the smaller barges positioned beneath it.
You're using the moon to lift a mountain. That is unbelievable.
It entirely changes how we should view those stone walls today. This wasn't just a test of brute strength or how many laborers a daimyo could whip into shape.
It was a test of brains.
Exactly. Executing midwater transfers of multi-ton objects is an extreme test of a lord's logistical genius. It tested their resource management, their naval engineering, and their technical skill.
So it was a whole package.
Yeah. If a daimyo could successfully pull that off, he was proving to the supreme leader, I have the wealth, the organization, and the brilliant minds required to be a lethal asset to you, or a lethal threat if I ever turned against you.
Look at my boulder, respect my supply chain.
Precise.
Well, to understand just how extreme this loyalty-flexing competition actually became, we have to look at the undeniable winner of this historical stone hauling contest. There is one specific stone mentioned in the guide that defies belief. The octopus stone.
Or in Japanese, the takuishi.
Right. And where is it?
It's located right near the main gate. It is the largest rock in the entire castle complex.
The measurements are just, they're hard to wrap your head around. It weighs approximately 108 tons.
Massive.
To put that in perspective, that is the equivalent of 10 large city buses squished into a single rock. And it's as wide as 36 tatami mats. It is a literal monster.
It is.
And reading that, my immediate screaming question was, how in the world do you move a 108-ton rock across dry land in an era completely devoid of heavy machinery or diesel engines?
The solution sounds almost absurd at first, but it is a stroke of pure biological engineering. They used wet kelp.
Wet kelp, seaweed.
Specifically a type called kondu.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The materials explain the mechanics of this. They would place these giant stones on massive wooden sleds, which were called shura. Then they would lay out massive amounts of this wet, slippery kelp across the ground in front of the sled. But how does soup algae work as an industrial lubricant for a 10-bus-sized rock?
It comes down to cellular biology. When you place a 108-ton weight on a wooden sled and drag it across gravel or dirt, the friction is so immense that the wood will literally combust or shatter.
Because of the heat?
Right. You need a sacrificial layer that absorbs the friction. Kelp is rich in alginate, a highly viscous compound.
Like slime.
Exactly like slime.
Yeah.
When those heavy wooden sleds crushed the wet kelp, it ruptured the cellular walls of the plant, releasing this incredibly slick biological slime. It acted exactly like industrial synthetic oil does today.
Wow.
It reduced the friction coefficient between the sled and the earth just enough to make the impossible possible.
I am just picturing the guy who pitched this idea to his warlord, where they just, eating dinner one night, dropped a piece of kelp, slipped on it, and thought, hey, fetch me a 10-bus-sized rock. I have an idea. It's brilliant.
It's a great image.
But the true impact of this kelp strategy goes far beyond just sliding rocks. The guide reveals a historical butterfly effect that completely caught me off guard.
Yeah, the scale of the construction is what triggered it. Because the daimyos were hauling so many colossal stones, and because they needed constant, massive layers of lubrication to move them over miles of land, Unprecedented quantities of kelp had to be harvested and imported into Osaka.
We're talking about mountains of seaweed.
The sheer volume required for this single construction project permanently altered trade routes and turned Osaka into the massive national hub for kelp distribution.
And because the city was suddenly overflowing with all this high-quality kelp, the local culture adapted to it. The materials state that this massive influx of construction kelp directly led to the creation and popularization of dashi. Dashi being the traditional soup stock that is the absolute heart and foundation of Japanese food.
The umami base for miso soup, noodle broth, simmering sauces, it all traces back to this moment in history.
It is mind-blowing. An engineering crisis at a military fortification inadvertently birthed the foundational flavor profile of an entire nation's cuisine.
It's an incredible connection.
Every time you, listening to this, sit down and enjoy a bowl of authentic Japanese ramen or miso soup, you are tasting the historical echo of a warlord trying to slide a 108-ton rock across the dirt.
It beautifully illustrates how human history refuses to stay in neat little boxes. Military conquest, hydraulic engineering, and culinary history are all woven together in these completely unexpected ways.
Let's pull back to the construction site itself, because as I was visualizing this, a terrifying logistical nightmare occurred to me.
Oh yeah, what's that?
You have all these fiercely competitive lords. They're all sliding gigantic rocks around the exact same muddy construction site. They're dumping thousands of tons of wet kelp everywhere. They're all desperately trying to impress the supreme leader. The environment must have been absolute chaos.
Undoubtedly.
If I just drained my family's treasury to drag 10 buses worth of stone from an island across the sea, I'm not leaving it on the honor system. How do they stop rival lords from just stealing each other's hard-earned boulders in the middle of the night?
That is a very real concern, and that paranoia brings us to an incredible detail found directly on the stones themselves.
The kokuin.
The ancient asset tracking system.
Yes.
The guide points out that if you look closely at the castle's massive stones today, you can see small carved symbols etched into the granite. These kokuin marks were used to manage the massive inventory.
Because so many different lords were working on the site at the same time, right?
Right, these marks explicitly showed who brought which stone. They served a very specific bureaucratic purpose. It was a way of making financial and physical responsibilities crystal clear. But more importantly, like you said, it prevented rivals from mixing up or outright stealing the stones and taking the credit.
It's not just a signature. It makes me think of like a cartel boss making his lieutenants sign their names on shipments of contraband. Or like writing your name in Sharpie on your lunch in the communal office fridge, except the lunch is a 100-ton rock.
Exactly. It's a hyper-organized accounting system born entirely out of lethal mistrust. And this raises an important question about the underlying human nature at play here.
How so?
Well, think about the psychological environment of this construction site. These daimyos are engaging in the ultimate, highly visible display of loyalty and subservience to their supreme leader. They are bleeding their own treasuries dry to build his fortress. And yet simultaneously, they fundamentally did not trust the man standing next to them.
I would die for the shogun, but I wouldn't leave my rock unattended near Lord Suzuki for 5 minutes.
Precisely. The kokuin aren't just fascinating because they are an ancient barcode system. They represent a highly sophisticated logistics network born entirely out of cutthroat competition. Even while building a unified symbol of national power, the internal rivalries were fierce and intensely guarded.
It really paints a picture of this rugged, sweaty, paranoid exterior. You have these massive raw stones, brute physical force, the smell of rotting kelp, and these territorial markings all over the place.
Very gritty.
But the guide doesn't stop at the walls, because while the exterior was this rugged display of muscle, the very top of the castle and its innermost rooms were designed to project an entirely different, much flashier kind of power. We're moving from heavy stone to the weightless gleam of pure gold.
It's a stark transition in architectural intent.
The guide tells us to look up at the roof. Sitting up there are the golden shachihoko.
Yes.
These are gleaming, mythical, fish-like creatures that serve a very specific purpose. People believed that these creatures would spit water to stop fires. They acted as the castle's ultimate fire guardians.
And you have to remember, considering Japanese castles of that era were primarily built of wood sitting above the stone foundations, fire was the absolute greatest existential threat to the structure.
One lightning strike and it's gone.
Right. A single spark could erase decades of work. So you place magical water-spitting fish on the roof to protect it?
But they didn't just carve them out of wood or cast them in iron. they covered them in gold. And this obsession with gold runs deep in the castle's history, especially with Toyotomi Hideyoshi before the Tokugawa era.
He was famous for it.
The sources point out that his love for gold was so extreme that he went out of his way to build a golden tea room. And this wasn't just a room painted yellow. To flaunt his incredible wealth, the walls, the ceiling, the pillars, the sliding doors, and even the tea utensils themselves were entirely covered in pure gold leaf.
A completely immersive, blinding golden environment.
So what does this all mean? Because, wait, stop. A golden tea room. Isn't the whole point of the traditional Japanese tea ceremony supposed to be about wabi-sabi?
It is, yeah.
I always thought the entire philosophy was about finding peace in humility, simplicity, and imperfection. You crawl through a tiny door, you leave your weapons outside, and you share a quiet moment. Wrapping the entire experience, right down to the teacup, in pure gold leaf sounds like a complete and utter violation of the culture.
Oh, it is a massive violation. And that is entirely the point.
Really?
Hideyoshi was a highly intelligent man. He understood the cultural weight of the tea ceremony perfectly. He knew the rules of wabi-sabi better than anyone. What we are seeing here isn't just a rich man lacking taste. It is brilliant, calculated psychological warfare.
Weaponizing the tea ceremony, how does that work?
By taking a deeply cultural, highly spiritual practice that was rigidly defined by minimalist simplicity and intentionally subverting it with unimaginable, blinding wealth.
Oh, wow.
Think about what happens when a rival lord or a foreign emissary is invited into that room. They step in, expecting the quiet humility of a rustic tea house. They are prepared to be equals in a space of zen. Instead, they are assaulted by the reflection of pure, unadulterated economic power.
It's basically a flashbang of wealth.
It's deliberately disorienting. It's intimidating. Hideyoshi is essentially saying, I am so powerful and I have so much wealth that I can rewrite the rules of our most sacred cultural traditions just because I feel like it.
It's not just showing off, it's showing that you are above the rules entirely. He's taking the ultimate symbol of equality and humility and turning it into a suffocating box of dominance. It's a power move that hits you right in the psyche while you're just trying to drink a cup of matcha.
The massive stones outside prove physical and logistical dominance. The golden tea room inside proves psychological and economic dominance. It leaves absolutely no room for any rival to feel comfortable, physically or spiritually.
Well, as we bring this deep dive to a close, it's amazing to step back and look at what we've actually uncovered from what started as just a bilingual guide script.
It really is a lot to take in.
We began by looking at a single piece of real estate that was so tactically valuable, armies fought a decade-long war just to own the river access and the dirt. We explored towering walls built on the backs of a hyper-competitive, paranoia-fueled stone-hauling frenzy, complete with ancient anti-theft barcodes carved right into the granite to prevent cartel-level backstabbing.
We unpacked the incredible physics of ancient naval engineering, lifting boulders with the tides.
And we discovered how crushing cellular plant walls for an industrial kelp lubricant inadvertently birthed a world-famous soup stock that defines Japanese cuisine today. Finally, we climbed to the roof with mythical golden fire extinguishers before stepping into a tea room where simplicity itself was weaponized into blinding golden intimidation.
It's a remarkable synthesis of history. And I think the most important takeaway is to recognize that while our tools and our technology drastically change over the centuries, human nature really doesn't.
We are remarkably consistent.
Next time you walk through a major modern city and you see a massive billion-dollar skyscraper piercing the clouds, or you see a tech billionaire flexing their unbelievable wealth in the media, realize that it's just the modern manifestation of the exact same human impulse.
Dragging a boulder.
It is just a modern CEO hauling their own 108-ton octopus stone, or a mogul building their own modern-day gold-plated tea room to intimidate the competition. The deep-seated desire to carve our names into the landscape and say, I was here and I was untouchable, is a universal constant.
We're all still just trying to drag our massive rocks at the top of the hill.
We are. But I want to leave you, our listener, with one final thought to mull over, something that stuck with me long after reviewing these materials.
What's that?
We can still see the cocoon marks today. We can still touch the massive stones. They survive centuries because they are made of solid granite. But the wooden sleds, the complex ropes, the shallow drac barges, and the thousands of pounds of slippery kelp, those rotted away completely hundreds of years ago. We only know about them through fragmented historical records.
The organic technology just vanishes.
It makes you wonder, Imagine the sheer amount of brilliant, unseen human ingenuity that has literally decomposed from the historical record across the globe. What invisible, kelp-like solutions are keeping our incredibly complex modern world running today's solutions so organic, so temporary, or so deeply embedded in our daily routines that future historians will completely miss them when they look back at our monuments 1,000 years from now?